Yeah, if our society was built around like the great cancel button and there was like a shrine in Washington D.C. where there was a big red glowing button on a pedestal like surrounded by guards, and every now and then someone was deemed worthy of canceling, and then like a priest in golden robes walked in and pressed like entered the name, typed it in and pressed the button, and then that person just puffed into a cloud of smoke. Then I'd be like, whoa, this is scary. We got to do something.
It's the Casey and Zoe thing.
Oh, hello, everybody. Hello.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, nice. We're just trying out the new controls and loving it. Nice, smooth transitions. Okay, so, what was it? Daily Beast. Don't stop saying cancel culture. And so you haven't read this yet, right, Zoe?
No, not at all.
Okay, I've read it and I wrote a bit about it on Instagram.
I saw your little
Instagram
response.
My Instagram story response. So the title is "Don't Stop Using the Term Cancel Culture."
Hi, Ivysaur. What's up?
Hey, what's up, Ivysaur? Hello. Welcome back. How's your day going? So the opening, the kind of the thesis is the phrase has been overused and abused, but it describes an undeniably real problem that's getting worse. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think this is I think that thesis, I would question the describes, but I like that it at least acknowledges the phrase has been overused and abused.
Yes.
But we'll get into it more. We'll discuss more as we go. But I wanted to give it credit for that. So, few terms have been as abused as quote-unquote cancel culture. Its very existence is a point of controversy. The text is a good size. Despite the fact that large majorities, both on and off campus, feel pressure to censor themselves for fear of losing their jobs or reputations. But it's a real thing, no matter how many ways its meaning has been wrongly distorted. And so just to give a little preview of how I think we both feel is this article points to real things that are happening that we think are negatives, and we don't agree with the label of cancel culture. I tend to think it's hyperbolic and reductive, and like Dale was saying earlier, people tend to just use it to refer to any protest, any boycott, any request for someone to be removed from a position that person does not like.
Right.
They're basically if you think a protest is legitimate, you call it a legitimate protest, and then if you don't, it's oh, this is cancel culture.
Right.
When it's really all just protests. And I think the better thing to do instead of using the term cancel culture is to criticize specific protests very specifically. And this article is going to get into this legitimate phenomenon. The data shows that many college professors are being fired because of statements that are either not that provocative or pretty mild, or even some you'll see they just encourage conversation. And so that's bad. And you can criticize thin-skinned college students and the absurd protesting of professors who haven't really done anything wrong without saying, this is cancel culture, because I think it's just it's silly. It's not necessary. Why are you adding that? And it seems like it's to vilify leftists, generally 100%. Speaking. And to scaremonger about oh, it's a wave of crazy protests, and I think there are better ways to criticize them.
Yeah, Ivysaur also made a good point. This is a good time to get nuanced about this topic when Putin criticized the West for canceling J.K. Rowling.
Yes, totally.
But yeah, and just to point to something that was written right here, no matter how many ways its meaning has been wrongly distorted. However, the term cancel culture is a pretty new phrase.
Oh, yeah.
Those two words together are pretty new. So to imply that the meaning is getting distorted is to imply that there is some sort of actual meaning to that phrase, rather than a bunch of people's interpretations of what they think the phrase is. So the meaning isn't really getting distorted, I don't think.
Well, there is no set meaning.
Exactly.
I think is the issue.
So you can't distort something that is not solid.
Right. Well, and that's the issue, is that it was, I mean, for my research, the term, using cancel as a term in this context started with the hashtag Cancel Colbert campaign.
Right.
when Stephen Colbert on his old show, he did like an ironically racist bit about like someone who was a right winger who's racist against Asian people. And I remember thinking that was like, so I was like, he's making fun of like I mean, like, I think there's definitely nuance there to be discussed, but for my personal values, I don't think it was that big a deal what he did. And then, but as far as the 2-word phrase of cancel culture, I don't remember encountering until women started calling out famous celebrity rapists. That seemed to be the first time where it started to be like, oh, this cancel culture. Shortly after, like initially when Me Too started, I think the general consensus was very approving and positive of go get that Harvey Weinstein. But then as more and more celebrities were outed, suddenly it started being talk about cancel culture. And the thing about the term too is it was popularized, I think it's fair to say it was popularized by right-wing Americans who used it to propagate this sort of ongoing fantasy of infinite victimhood. So even if now it's being used by like more liberal-minded people to say like, oh, dissenting voices are being silenced on both sides, like, okay, but like I think if anyone has sort of a claim to the proper definition of that term, it's the people who used it the most first, and that was right-wingers with a victim complex.
Yeah. Also, I mean, in my experience, cancel culture is different, but in my experience, the term cancel, felt like it got big on Twitter as like a joke. When people are like, "Oh, he's canceled," or like your ex-boyfriend canceled.
It did, but
like
I
that's
think,
what I know cancel from.
I think that came well after the I thought that was a response to right-wingers popularizing and playing the victim with cancel culture, and then people started saying like, "Oh, I guess they're canceled now," and so-so's canceled, and I don't know.
Yeah. Ivysaur said Google Trends for cancel culture shows a small spike in September 2019, then 2 larger ones in July 2020 and March 2021. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, my own experience of knowing the word cancel started on Twitter.
Right. And from what I've Googled, it seems like there's not a lot of clear timelines out there on where and when how did it all develop. But again, from my experience, it seemed like it was very much exclusively a rhetorical cudgel of the right wing for a long time.
Right. At least cancel culture.
Yes. Yeah, no, not the term. Well, the term cancel goes back even further. There's like some like funk song from the 70s that like is apparently like the real sort of origin of using it to mean like this person's canceled. So there's all kinds of roots. But again, that's why for me it's always going to just feel like this thing that right wingers said to be like everyone's always canceling me. Like that's always how it's going to sound to me, even if now it seems like you'll see in this article, it feels like it's kind of being reclaimed by American liberals, center-right liberals, for
I think
this new definition.
Ivysaur and Ragnaz, I think you were both here maybe when we were doing the Trump document. I think you were both here. We got taken off of YouTube for copyright infringement, which is so funny because you didn't play any songs or videos.
Yeah, it's weird. I feel like there must be something random in there, but if there's not...
So we got canceled.
Yeah, we got canceled, right. YouTube canceled us.
We got canceled by YouTube. But, no, so silly.
And,
But yeah, I mean, it's a very I know, isn't that crazy? It's very frustrating to listen to anyone specifically on the right speak about cancel culture ever, because it's almost always in regards to someone being quote-unquote silenced for spreading what is pretty obviously mis or disinformation, or it's like to be homophobic or to be racist. Well, I can't say this anymore, I'll get canceled. It's like, you shouldn't have been saying it in the first place. Yeah. It's like that's what's so frustrating about this, is it's used as this like weird like jumping off point to be an asshole.
And again, to say I'm getting canceled is to relieve yourself of the responsibility of actually explaining your position.
Right.
And what you think is, flawed in the person protesting you's position. It's so much easier to say like, oh, here come the cancelers again, canceling me, because then you don't have to explain like, well, why did you say that thing? What are your values?
Right.
what do you think of this question that further interrogates the beliefs you're asserting? You know, like all that nuance can't be gotten into because it's just like, oh, I'm being canceled.
Right.
Like, no, you're just being protest. And sometimes things are protested legitimately. And sometimes some protests are very silly and dumb. And let's distinguish those things and let's criticize protest by protest instead of trying to pretend like there's this new culture of people who just want to cancel. And the thing too is like, it's just anger. It's just like Americans are angry. People are just mad because the system is very unfair and unjust, and they're lashing out. And some people have the education and awareness to lash out at worthwhile targets, and some don't. And will lash out at very silly things, like my professor asked a question, you know, like. But the root of the issue is, it's like, yes, that individual is being silly, but they wouldn't even be being silly like that if there weren't so much legitimate, you know, inequity and injustice across all of society that opens the door for this. Because I think also, like, same thing with conspiracy theorists, like humans. You know, we lean towards intuitive reasoning and emotional thinking, and yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but whatever. I'll say more. So, to continue the article, on March 3rd, Sergei Naryshkin, head of Russian foreign intelligence, accused the West of attempting to, quote, cancel their government for its invasion of Ukraine, echoing claims made by Vladimir Putin about alleged American cancel culture. Former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said the allegations of sexual harassment and a toxic workplace that led to his resignation were cancel culture. And of course, former President Donald Trump has blamed cancel culture for just about everything, including the January 6th committee's decision to subpoena Roger Stone and Alex Jones. Ridiculous non-examples of cancel culture, such as these, provide all the ammunition needed for media and academic elites to blithely weigh the phrase as nothing more than a misleading term for a fake problem. And there are a lot of those, like, ridiculous. Well, and see, here's the thing, like, these non-examples of cancel, who are you to say that those aren't cancel culture? Why? That's, like, again, in my experience, these are the kinds of things that this term has been used to refer to primarily. So to just be like, oh, that's not cancel. Like, that's what most people who've been ringing the alarm bells about cancel culture, those are the most often used, you know, examples. Is like rich, powerful guys trying to dodge responsibility and be like, I'm being canceled. But just because the term has been grossly overused, doesn't mean we should give up on its popularly understood definition, which aptly describes a real and growing problem. This is the measurable uptick. So now, like, remember that, like, this is what, and for me, an uptick in a phenomenon that already has been occurring since the beginning of human civilization does not equate to a new culture.
Yeah.
It's an uptick. It's a cultural trend.
Yeah.
And perhaps you could call it a subculture,
Yeah.
the word that
Yeah,
Zoe
yeah,
used
yeah.
in our conversation earlier before stream. But to call it a whole new culture is hyperbolic. It's not, like, people have been protesting stuff since the beginning of human civilization. And some protests are smart and some are stupid. And let's talk about that and not try to just be like, oh, the fact that there's more, like, there's been an uptick of this specific kind of dumb protest in one situation, that now it's a whole culture.
Right.
So this is the measurable uptick since around 2014 of campaigns to get people fired, disinvited, deplatformed, or otherwise punished for speech that is or would be protected by First Amendment standards. That's cancel culture. So now they've declared that that's the definition. Just by their own, apparently they are the arbiter of definitions.
It's like...
yeah, sorry.
So protected by First Amendment standards. So what whoever's writing this is insinuating is if someone is deplatformed by the government, because I think there's a lot of confusion in what the First Amendment standards are.
And there's a lot of confusion in this article because, everything, they're going to talk about professors getting fired, and none of that is actually a violation of First Amendment speech. Traditionally,
none of it.
It's just private universities choosing to fire certain professors,
right?
Which they have the right to do under current laws. And what's funny to me is like the kind of freedom of speech they're dreaming of one where, you know, anyone could say whatever they think and not have to worry about getting fired or facing any kind of professional or economic consequence just because the person who employs them thinks that what they said was problematic. That kind of freedom of speech, which I think actually would be a good thing. I think we should have more freedom of speech than we currently do. That kind of freedom of speech cannot exist under capitalism. Like for any of you out there, if you've ever, you know, if you're one of the majority of Americans, or, you know, people around the world, but obviously this is more about America we're talking now, but the majority of Americans who live paycheck to paycheck, like, you know, you don't have freedom of speech of that kind. Right. Like what they want for these professors to be able to say whatever they want and never have their boss be like, uh-oh, this might be bad for my university business and now you're fired. Like, we all, minimum wage workers, we don't have any freedom of speech. There was a kid who was posting like TikToks about Starbucks or something and like complained about a customer. And had been working there for like 10 years. Complained about a customer, didn't even mention Starbucks, got fired. And now is like starving. Like, you can't, like, there is that kind of freedom of speech. No, does not exist. No, like just go into your boss's office and tell them what you really think of them and watch what happens. It's not going to be like, well, I don't like what you had to say, but freedom of speech dictates that you're allowed to say it, so I will keep employing you. No, they'll fire you. They'll fire you. So like, and you'll see we're getting deep when we're still pretty early in the article, but if these authors really want that level of freedom of speech to exist, or if anyone does, you should endorse socialism. Like, you should endorse a system where workers control the means of production and all basic human needs are decommodified. And then truly everyone would have true freedom of speech to speak their mind freely and never be able to be punished with poverty or starvation or homelessness or anything else. What would you then suggest, though, as a punishment, I guess, for like hate speech or blatant racism or homophobia or xenophobia? Because if what you're arguing for is like complete free speech without threat of poverty, which I do agree with. Right. Well, people could still you could still get fired. Right. But you just wouldn't die. But the issue is, if it was a market socialist system like we endorse, what would happen, I believe, is that it would be up to the workers would control the means of production. Yes. So if one person in the company is like doing hate speech all over the place, then you know, most likely the majority of the people, the workers, would be like, we're not cool with this. If they're not. Yeah. They would say, oh, we're not cool with this. This person's doing hate speech and it's fucking us up and, you know, ruin our day and making us feel unsafe. And then you would have a democratic vote in the company of like, you're out. Like, if you're going to behave like that and say such awful things, you're out of our... The big distinction is that they wouldn't die because of it. And also they wouldn't die. Yeah, yes. I was getting to that. I was getting, that also, if they're kicked out, they're not going to starve. Right. They'll still have a home. They'll still have food. They'll still have health care when they need it. Right. And they can go look for to do something else somewhere if they want to find another job. Got it. Or maybe even change their behavior and stop saying hate speech. Yeah. Well, you know, there still would be consequences. It just wouldn't be execution by poverty. Is the distinction. Yeah, totally. And Ivy Sword did say something interesting a little earlier, that the term ostracize, just let me scroll up a tiny bit. Yeah. The term ostracize comes from classical Athens, extreme democracy for free male citizens, where they had an official procedure to vote and exile one person for 10 years. Yes. Crazy. Yeah, and so and that's the thing is I think a democratically controlled, worker co-op, for example, would have the right to say, if someone was like, oh my God, they're being really awful, they're saying terrible things and whatever it is, they would have the right to sort of democratically exile them from the company, but they wouldn't actually be ostracized from society or killed with poverty. Right. Also, hi, Cheeseburger Merv. Hey, what's up, Cheeseburger Merv? Yeah, got it. Good explanation. Good job. Okay, so I'm just sorry. So we say, they said, would be for speech that would be protected by First Amendment standards. That's cancel culture. We say, quote unquote, would be because the First Amendment does not apply to private companies. So while the NFL was free to punish Colin Kaepernick and The View was free to suspend Whoopi Goldberg, these are still examples of cancel culture under their definition.
Right.
Because the subjects of each controversy engaged in expression that would be protected were the First Amendment standard to apply. Now, I don't think this checks out. If the View wants to suspend Whoopi Goldberg for saying whatever, they can do that even if she says nothing. They can do that whenever they want.
Yeah.
Like, what? I don't understand what they're even talking about here. Because the First Amendment does not protect the right to say whatever you want in a talk show and not be fired by the producers of the talk show.
This is just a misunderstanding of what you think First Amendment rights cover.
It seems
is what it
like
feels like. It just feels like you don't know what that means.
Right. But these are like paid these are paid journalists at the Daily Beast. It's like
just,
it seems really confused. And I'm like, I want to be,
yeah,
fair. I don't want to jump to the conclusion that like I know what's going on and they don't, but like this seems like a very confused understanding of First Amendment law.
Totally. Yeah. It shouldn't be this confusing. It just feels like they're like backtracking. They're like, okay, but this isn't cancel culture, but like this is a little bit cancel culture, but like this one, like I think this is cancel culture.
This is the whole problem. This is why the term sucks. The fact that these liberal journalists have to write a whole fucking manifesto to try to explain the definition and why their definition's right and others are wrong and the progressives are ruining it. You'll see. So
I'm so excited.
So what happened to Ilya Shapiro, David Shore, and Kathy Griffin? Cancel culture. What happened to Andrew Cuomo, Jeff Zucker, Harvey Weinstein, January 6 rioters, and the Russian military? Not cancel culture, despite their cries to the contrary. So again, just kind of saying.
So when it happened to shitty people not
that these authors deem shitty, that's cancel. That's not cancel culture. But if the authors deem these people shitty, then it is cancel culture. Which brings me again back to my point that what you're talking about is just bad protesting. You're just talking about stupid protests.
Well, and
you don't have to bring up canceling or cancel culture.
And yeah, I mean, I guess by like taking a job away from someone who like sexually assaulted someone, the taking their job away, you would say, is like a form of protest, like pushing them out of their job. Because like with like Cuomo, that was, and Weinstein, that's what happened.
Protest.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then like what happened with Kathy Griffin, her picture was a form of protest,
and the response to it was a form of protest.
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so then, it's funny they say here, unfortunately, the meaning of cancel culture has been so badly damaged by these latter examples that some believe we should abandon the term and find a new one. And to be clear, I don't think we should abandon the term and find a new one. I think we should abandon the term and use the old terms we already had.
Like protest.
And boycott and ask ourselves, what is it about right now? And the specific kinds of protests that are happening and the specific targets, who are most often the targets of these protests, what is it about that right now that would make, for some reason, a lot of very generally economically privileged people say that a cancel culture has come and taken hold of the land and the hearts of the people, and the madness is spreading. Like, no, it's just say, if you think a protest is stupid, name the protest specifically and who's doing it and explain why you think it's stupid.
Yeah.
Falling back on this term is just lazy. It's intellectual laziness, and it encourages intellectual laziness.
Yeah.
And so then now I'm kind of the thesis again, but that would be a mistake to abandon the term and find a new one. Oh, again, we don't want to find a new one. Just use the words we already had. But that would be a mistake, not only because cancel culture, the phenomenon, is all too real, but also because cancel culture, the term, is an effective, widely understood descriptor.
No, it's not. Nobody knows what the fuck it means.
It's so widely understood, we had to write a manifesto explaining how to understand it.
Oh my God. It's like, wait, you had to literally be like, okay, this situation, cancel culture. This one, not cancel culture. Everybody knows what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody gets it, and that's why I have to keep explaining the differences in very specific and subjective terms. So it's not just anecdotal. The data show cancel culture is real. And so this is some good data in here that I think is good to know about. We know we will face stiff resistance for standing by the idea that cancel culture exists. Oh, heroes. So noble. Oh, wow, good work, guys. In the past few weeks alone, the New York Times came under the withering scrutiny of the elites. by running 2 pro-free speech opinion pieces. The first, an op-ed titled, "I Came to College to Debate, I Found Self-Censorship Instead," by former Fire intern Emma Camp, was met with reasonable criticism, some praise, but also such an immediate and prolonged backlash across the internet that you'd think Emma wrote Mein Kampf, not a defense of open debate and discussion on campus. So, I mean, like, we can check out what it says here. No, get out of here. Get out of here.
We're looking at also hi Murphy 3007. I don't know what the dev hour stream is, so you might be in the wrong place. And Blyvic says Dem Katsaris is just going on and on, leaving us all unattended. What was I gonna say? We are looking at Daily Beast right now.
Yes.
And yeah, it's pretty off base, I'll say.
But yeah, but I wanted to, do you know how to just open in a new, okay, you know, I'll just do this.
Shut up. Murphy 3007 said devour these nuts. Thank you. That was good. Got me.
Right? And I do this. There we go. Okay, because I just want to see what this silly thing says.
Oh, is this one of the things
that... mockery over self-censorship. Yeah, woke panic indeed. The New York Times and college student Emma Camp are both under fire. And wait, when is this from? March 7th.
Can we make this a little bigger?
Absolutely.
Oh, we sure can, baby.
Bigger than that.
Hot.
There we go. The New York Times and college student Emma Camp are both under fire over her opinion piece published in the newspaper of record, lamenting what she claims is an increase in self-censorship on college campuses. Okay. Quote, even as a liberal who has attended abortion rights protests and written about standing up to racism, I sometimes feel afraid. Even after that? Oh my gosh! You'd think that would have earned you enough golden coins that you could just say whatever you want now. I sometimes feel afraid to fully speak my mind, Camp says. But Emma Camp isn't just any University of Virginia senior. Despite claiming to be a, quote, a liberal, she's a writer at the libertarian outlet. Oh, so she's one of these. Reason and former intern, the traditional liberal, classical liberal, and a former intern at the right-leaning Koch-funded Foundation for Individual Rights and Education. Fire's latest tweet is apparently a defense of right-wing activist Andy Ngo, who's an awful guy. Discredited provocateur, yes. So this is just, yeah, no, this is right. Okay, so this reveals a lot, I think, about these Daily Beast articles' authors' perspective. Because this is clearly one of these right-wing people pretending to be a classical liberal, quote-unquote, and just, like, bitching about lefties.
Yeah.
This is bullshit. This is, I mean, like, they're falling for bullshit. Now they're saying, like, oh, you think she wrote Mein Kampf. No, she wrote something disingenuous.
Yeah.
To continue this absurd narrative that's so popular in modern politics of, like, the left me. That's all this is. This is like propaganda for the left me shit. So that's rough. That's the first piece they cite as, like, unfairly maligned, because that is very fairly maligned. The second piece, published by the New York Times editorial board, argued that Americans are losing, quote, the right to speak their minds and voice their opinions in public without fear of being shamed or shunned.
Okay, but, like, this is what gets me. Why are you all so horny for speaking your mind when speaking your mind is like gay people are icky?
Yeah, yeah.
People are like, why can't I just tell a woman she has a nice ass? Like, that's often what this is about.
Most of the time, yeah.
And it's like, what? Do you not see anything ethically wrong with this?
Yeah.
Like, that's what's so frustrating about this. It's like, you're not losing the right to speak your mind. You're losing your right to be an asshole and keep your job.
Right. And I think, you know, there is nuance to it in that, like, you know, there are, I'm sure, a lot of Americans who now feel very anxious about speaking their mind about probably things that aren't that gross, you know, like, just like, and I think it really speaks to how, you know, how crappy our education systems are, you know, because I think that's really why a lot of these people feel so unsure of what to say. It's because, like, they don't know what they're talking about. And, like, yes, like, if you walk into these discussions, you know, like, if you walk into an online debate and you don't know what terms mean and you don't, like, you're probably going to embarrass yourself and get yelled at. But generally speaking, I think Americans can speak pretty freely. Like, there's not, like, there are very specific areas where like, you know, you're going to encounter more, like, in my view, legitimately negative woke scolding. I think it can be pretty easily avoided. Even though I do think it's shitty when it happens.
Ragnar said, but Zoe, America's all about being an asshole and keeping your job.
Right, exactly. And so in the article, though the use of the word right in this context was unfortunate, there's absolutely no legal right not to be shamed or shunned. Yeah,
right.
Too many elite critics with large followings use this as an excuse to dismiss the larger message of the piece. Some critics even demanded that the piece be retracted and its writers resign. But the New York Times claimed that, quote, however you define cancel culture, Americans know it exists and feel its burden, was not outlandish. Far from it. Our own research corroborates it. But this statement of itself makes no sense. However you define cancel culture, Americans know it exists and feel its burden. However you define it, so it can be defined many ways. Mm-hmm. So how can Americans know it? Like, some Americans think it exists and feel its burden, and some don't. And like presenting as it's just like that it's black and white, that it's absolute, is so off base, especially if you're going to say in the same sentence, however you define it. However you define it.
You know it's there. Like, no.
No. If someone defines it as being a scaremongering figment made up to discredit the left and propagate the victim complex of the right, well, then the rest of your statement doesn't work anymore. New York Times writer.
Good night, Replica Fox.
Good night, Replica Fox. Great to have you here. See you soon. Okay, so let's get down. So, a survey commissioned late last year by FIRE, where we work, found that 73% of Americans are familiar with the term, quote-unquote, cancel culture. Makes sense. Of those, nearly 60% believe quote, there's a growing cancel culture that is a threat to our freedom. Only 25% of that 73% do not. Additionally, 70% of those surveyed said they were afraid to say what they believe because they were worried about it, worried it could impact their job or standing in school. Mm-hmm. So, I think there's a lot to look at here in this paragraph. First of all, let's break down the numbers a little
Can we look at the survey? I want to know what, like, their sample size. I want to, because, like, you can't say 73% of Americans based on a survey, like, without good parameters.
National Fire Survey. 2,500 adults.
Okay, so based on 2,500 adults.
Pretty small sample size.
Right, and they're not giving us any clue as to where you gathered these 2,500 adults.
Right.
So it just feels inaccurate to cite this survey, really.
Yeah.
However,
it seems like a very limited study.
Which is like, okay, a study's a study, good for you. But
But then also I think it's worth looking at the okay, 73%, okay, said they're familiar with the term. So 60% of 70% is about, what, like
Let's take
40,
a lookie. I think something like that. So
42?
43.8% of 100%.
43.8. Ergo, a minority of Americans.
Yeah.
A minority of Americans think that it is that there's a growing cancel culture that's a threat to our freedom. So right here, very early in the article, they have admitted that
it's the minority.
It's a minority. That there's apparently 27% who are like, "What's cancel culture?" when you ask them.
Yeah.
And then another that makes out the rest of the more than 50% of Americans. It's just like, no, we don't think it's a big scary thing. So right here we have that at best. Even let's be friendly and round it up. Literally, it's a 50-50 split.
Yeah.
Like, there's no agreement on the definition of this, and you can write your big liberal manifesto declaring that this is the proper definition of cancel culture, but the fact is no one agrees on the definition of it because it's a shitty term.
Ragnar said knowing is 2/3 of 3/4 of the battle.
Totally. So,
Hi, buddy.
So, and then here's also missing a little piece here. Of those, the 73%, nearly 60% believe there's a growing cancel culture, but only 25% do not. So where's the other 15%? No opinion?
I guess.
Neutral? Because
like,
if they
you either do or you don't.
Yeah, you either do or you don't. I don't really see how there is a middle. Like, I guess there could be a middle of just like, I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
Or like, stop talking to me, I don't care.
Yeah,
Leave
but
me
like
alone.
that's interesting.
15% were annoyed we were even asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
And so then, 70% of those surveyed said they were afraid. So 70% of 2,500 people, 2,500 Americans out of hundreds of millions, said, that they've been. And then this raises the question of, is it always bad for people to be afraid to say certain things? And I would say no. I'd say like in some case, I'd say in a lot of cases, it's not good. I'm big on conversation. I'm big on communication. I think it's the solution to a lot of the problems we're facing right now, in my view. And so I don't want to discourage healthy debate. But I think one of the issues is a lot of times, especially we experience this in discussions online and on Twitch, is that a lot of times people come into this debate and any debate, and they reveal very quickly that they don't even understand the terms they're using. And so in those kinds of situations where it's like if you go into a debate and you aren't prepared and you don't know what terms mean and you get your ass rocked, and then you come out of it and you're like, whether it's a little debate between buddies at a bar or a debate on a college stage or whatever, and you come out of it being like, well, now I'm afraid to say what I believe because it could impact, like I could get in trouble. It's like you should educate yourself. Like there's a responsibility there. Like if you want to come to these debates about whatever, I think there's a responsibility to educate yourself. And if you choose to come in cocky but ignorant,
right,
that's on you. And you are probably
you should be scared.
You should be scared.
If you come in like trying to argue what socialism is, and you don't even argue whether or not socialism is like morally defensible, and then like don't know what socialism means,
and don't know what capitalism is,
you shouldn't be talking about
and the solution the solution to your fear is to educate yourself. Is go fucking learn what these terms mean before you go into a debate. Learn where things are at with trans science and trans theory. Like if you want to debate, or you can stay out of it. Also, that's always an option. Like Americans can just shut up about like trans issues, for example. You can just be like, I don't know and I have no comment. That's fine with me. But like if you're going to walk into these debates, if you're going to go and comment on people's social media posts and do whatever, like maybe educate yourself. And maybe the reason you're scared sometimes is just because you don't know shit. And maybe what needs to be happen is you going to a library, not everyone else just giving you complete carte blanche to say anything you want in any situation. And then this little line, other surveys of the American public have produced similar findings. Like, okay, so we could dig into that, and like I'm sure viewed as a threat to freedom by 60. So this says 64% of Americans. Let's read this. Maybe this actually has data that says it's a majority. According to a new poll, the poll, which was conducted by Harvard, Capps Harris, and shared exclusively with The Hill, found 64%, 36% disagreed. Let's see.
It doesn't say
how big a poll it was.
What's the sample size? Where did you pull these people from?
Wait,
come on, this is like basic statistics. Like what? That you should be providing this information.
They didn't even they didn't even hyperlink according to a new poll.
Immediately be posting this information.
Yeah. It's almost like there's a lot of crappy journalism out there.
We love when they're like, this study said, I swear.
This study agrees with me.
Guys, the study. It said the study. Let's see. Yikes.
And even if worth saying too, that if you accept the definition of cancel culture as being like a term for stupid protests, which is like the only definition I could really hang with, well then it's Republicans win that contest big time, like throughout history, like from boycotting Dungeons and Dragons because they thought it was Satan worship, to boycotting the Dixie Chicks. Like you want to talk about stupid protests, like it's a Republican tradition. So so this is not really giving us good data. So basically they are linking to shitty articles to justify their not so great article.
Ivy Sawyer said 9 out of 10 Twitch viewers say Pip is the best person on this stream.
Yay, Pip, you hear that?
Pip!
Pip, you win the vote. Good boy. So, the UK-based Legatum, I don't know the word, Legatum Institute, Legatum, found that 50% of academics in the U.S. feel the need to censor their own political beliefs while on campus. These academics are making a prudent decision. More than 1 in 3 faculty admit they would discriminate against conservatives when making hiring decisions. The other thing, too, is, like, also just in general, like, polling people on their fears and then presenting their fears as legitimate evidence of, I mean, certainly evidence of their fear.
Yeah.
But like, unless you know, like, all these people could be completely wrong about thinking that if they said what they want to say, they'd get fired.
Right.
You know, like, this is just this is just measuring people's anxiety.
Right.
So far.
I also want to point out that I don't like the word discriminate against conservatives because conservatism is a choice.
Right.
It doesn't feel like discrimination. I had a conservative philosophy professor, the only one in the entire school. And he came into class one day and was like, Black Lives Matter is insane. Like, anybody who supports it, you guys are idiots. Like, that's what happens when you hire a conservative to be a philosophy professor. Right. I don't really think that's discrimination.
No.
I think
discriminating against people for their beliefs is the right of a private institution under the current law.
Yes.
Fully.
It's very different when it's like a sexuality or a skin color.
Absolutely, something you can't choose.
You can choose to be a conservative.
Yeah, and you can choose to stop. And like we said earlier, too, you know, I would like there to be more freedom for people to speak their mind. And the only way I see to do that is some form of socialism. Like capitalism, under capitalism, bosses are always going to be able to fire you for saying something they don't like. That's like built in. So... yeah, if you really want that level of freedom, it's weird that these authors are liberals and like capitalism. It doesn't really make sense to me. It doesn't align. So, moreover, nearly 1 in 4 social science or humanities faculty and almost 1 in 2 social science or humanities PhD students surveyed in the U.S. supported at least one campaign to dismiss a dissenting academic. And again, like we were just saying, there are some beliefs that I'm totally fine with saying, like, I don't want you to be a professor anymore. You know, like, there are some beliefs that I think are shitty enough to warrant that. Simply put, study after study decidedly shows cancel culture not only exists, but also that in too many places it is thriving. All they've talked about is professors at college campuses.
Right-wing professors.
Well, no, they're going to get into, it's happening to left-wing professors, too.
Okay.
And they actually present, a fair amount of data to present that it is kind of balanced.
Okay.
But the issue is, like, that proves cancel culture exists because professors are getting their feet held to the fire by thin-skinned college students. Like, it's such a leap to me. Study after study decidedly shows cancel culture not only exists, but is thriving.
I also think whoever wrote this, is bad at choosing words.
Well, yes. Yes, it does seem that way.
Yeah, okay.
Study after study, they presented like 5 studies all about colleges and college students and professors. And they're saying cancel culture exists, period. Not cancel culture exists on college campuses.
No, it just exists.
No. It decidedly shows. Like, this is a bold claim after presenting so little evidence, and a lot of the evidence being presented in a faulty manner. Like, their math is bad. So, next section. Cancel culture is getting worse. One of the most vocal critics of the New York Times editorial is journalist Adam Davidson. He asked, quote, can one of you believers in cancel culture just write one piece that gives evidence and doesn't just speak to a feeling you have, unquote. Yes, we can, says the authors.
Oh, boy!
On campus! On campus! There are hundreds of examples in only the past few years. What about off-campus, sweethearts? It's just like...
But the thing is, like, and at the beginning of the article, the examples used of what these people believe is cancel culture, none of them were professors. And then it was like Kathy Griffin and like Whoopi Goldberg. And now all of the evidence that's provided is specific to colleges.
Right.
So what about the other stuff?
What about the rest of society outside of campuses? If it's a culture that's taking the nation by storm, surely you can find evidence outside of
a college campus?
Yeah, outside of like, college students getting mad at their professors. On campus, there are hundreds of examples in only the past few years, limited just to scholars, and likely thousands if you count students, which is amazing because 80% of students at not-for-profit four-year colleges attend only about 600 schools. We are gathering data on student cancellations, but from the approximately 1,500 incidents we look at each year, we already know that students get in trouble for far more often than professors.
Wait, the people who are not in the position of power get in trouble more than the people in the position of power?
That's interesting.
That is a hot take. Everybody sit down.
We work on college campuses where cancel culture hit first and hardest.
First?
It's just
Did it?
It's just that everyone's mad, and college students have the most like book learning to put behind their anger,
and money,
and money, and social influence. And again, we'd have to dig into all these specific examples to really say for sure. And I'm going to say in my prediction that most of these cases where these professors were dropped, it was because the people in charge saw that there was a threat to their power in keeping that professor on, whether it was economic or social or whatever.
Well, right. Like if a bunch of students like drop out,
that's
money.
That's money and that's prestige, like.
Yeah, Blaving said famously, out of work homeless man Jordan Peterson can confirm.
Yes.
Exactly.
Seriously. So we know that cancel culture is more than just a, quote, feeling people have. Since 2015, we documented 563 attempts, 345 from the left, 202 from the right, 16 from neither. So now using these numbers, keeping it limited to colleges, where of course I would expect there's more left protesting of right things.
Of course.
We do love to protest here on the left. It's good that we do.
We love a hot little protest.
And whereas, the right loves to generally roll with the status quo in most cases. But by picking these numbers, they're presenting it as though like, oh, the left is really what's all about. But obviously, as I said earlier, if you look at the full history of stupid protests in America, the right wing wins by a country mile.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're examining academic settings tend to skew left.
Yes. Because the more books you read, the more likely you're going to be a leftist.
It's crazy how that works.
It's so weird.
It's wild. But
probably
anyway.
means leftists are nuts. Probably.
Right, because we're crazy.
Reading all those brain-breaking books.
But Ragnat's made a good point. This seems like more of an arts problem. Somehow I imagine science and math isn't as wrought with canceling. Well, yeah, I mean, because the social sciences and humanities are not widely accepted as universal truths. I mean, we live within a society that can't even agree on basic human rights or necessities. So, of course, it's going to be social sciences and humanities, which causes the most sort of issue.
Totally. 2/3, 362 incidents, 64%, of these cancellation attempts were successful, resulting in some form of professional sanction leveled at the scholar, including over 1/5 resulting in termination. When Greg joined FIRE in 2001, the idea of one tenured professor being fired for protected speech seemed impossible. Yet since 2015, there have been 30.
Wow.
So like here, it's like, yeah, I think that's bad.
Also, hi, Sweatiest Gamers. Welcome.
Hey, what's up, Sweatiest Gamers? I don't think, especially when they get into the details of why some of these professors were fired, their specific actions, I think it's excessive. I think it's extreme. I think it's uncalled for. And I can criticize college students going too far in their protests of certain professors without ever uttering the words cancel or cancel culture. To use these words is a choice, and it's not because like there's no good term. There are terms. We have terms for this stuff. Protesting, boycotting.
Right.
Calling
Yeah,
for the
but-
removal of such and so person from office. These are terms and phrases we've had for as long as there's been an English language, pretty much.
Right. But calling it cancel culture is so cute and flirty.
Right. Yeah. Well, it does just seem like scaremongering. So where were we? The problem has only gotten worse, particularly over the past few years. Just since the start of 2020, there have been 283 cancellation attempts. And it reads so silly because what it actually is, there have been 283 protests of professors that you think were stupid protests. That's what actually is going on. And this is what puts me off the most, and why I've always been really opposed to this term, is because almost always when people say cancel culture, they deploy it as though there is a concrete set definition for the term. And there's not.
Yeah.
There's mountains, pits of debate about this. And,
Right.
and the three primary factions of politics in America cannot agree at all.
Right.
And have radically different definitions for it.
Yes.
So it just doesn't work. And there are better words.
Hi, the Amazing Wolf Skeptic. Welcome.
Hey, what's up, the Amazing Wolf Skeptic? Welcome to the chat.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very weird thing. I think, a huge issue now is people calling things new things.
Yes.
I think that's this whole epidemic is people making up words like critical race theory for learning about Black history in school.
Which obviously was a thing for a proper legitimate term for
a law
collegiate school of
course.
thought. Yes.
And
that's redefining.
yes.
That's different.
Well, yeah. You're right.
That's also terrible. Taking that and twisting the definition. Whereas cancel culture is just inventing a term that we don't need because it's scary and gets votes.
Right.
But yeah, so since 2015, there have been 163 investigations, 117 terminations, 109 suspensions, 48 resignations, 45 censorship incidents, 33 demotions, 18 retractions, 30, all for ideological reasons.
That's usually why they happen.
Also worth noting, they give this little anecdotal when Greg joined FIRE in 2001, the idea of one tenured professor being fired for protected speech seemed impossible. So that's your source, is that Greg thinks that one tenured professor being
my
fired
bestie Greg
is impossible. Your source is Greg and his feelings. And yet, despite Greg's feelings, since 2015, there have been 30. And so it's worth noting that as they list off all these scary numbers, there have been 163 investigations, 117 terminations, 109 suspensions. Where is the data for earlier years? If you want to say that this is some huge uptick, then you better give me decades of data.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Of backlog data.
Yeah.
How many investigations were there in the year 2002? Right after September 11th. I'd be curious to know. Mm-hmm. How many terminations? How many suspensions?
After COVID hit.
But they won't give us those reference points. All they gave us so far that I've seen that seems good is Greg. Greg says the idea is wild. So
we love Greg, right?
You have to. I mean, Greg is the arbiter of truth.
Yeah. High and mighty Greg.
Yeah.
Blaving says, poor Greg.
Poor Greg.
And yes, Amazing Wolf Skeptic. We are leftists, essentially. We do identify as market socialists. Blaving says we're anarchists. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely a little anarchist. When you include schools with scholar sanction attempts, schools where FIRE intervened by writing letters and or providing legal assistance, schools with restrictive speech codes, and schools that disinvited guest speakers, 97 of U.S. News' top 100 schools have perpetuated some form of censorship since 2015. So if you include, everything. So if you include restrictive speech codes and disinviting guest speakers and scholar sanction attempts, it's 97 out of 100. Mm-hmm. What if you do one of those several? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you just pile up things until you could get to 97%? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this data is goofy.
It's really goofy.
I love goofy data.
It's fun to pick apart.
Isn't statistics like the first math class you have to take at college? Like, this is it's such a weird thing when certain journalists provide all of these sort of numbers and things, and then don't speak to sample sizes, don't speak to things like that. Like, it's important data.
It's very important context. Like, if you're going to cite data, like these are important data points for your data.
Yeah, for sure. N9000, hi, welcome. Said M9000.
Hey,
I got it.
Welcome.
Said, I get that critical race theory is a term used by a lot of people who just don't want to talk about racism at all, but at the same time, critical race theory is wrong and bad as an anti-racist framework.
Interesting. How so? How would you say that critical race theory is a bad framework for anti-racism?
But also, critical race theory in its essence is a college. It's critical theory through the lens of race. Yeah. Generally taught in law school. It was found by a right-wing journalist who then used the term, redefined it, and it's become a talking point among the right.
Yes.
Was never taught in grade-level schools. To critically analyze race, you could say that's critical race theory, because it's critical theory through the lens of race. But the phrase critical race theory is specific to that college course, and I think the big problem is that once we redefine that, just like what's happening with cancel culture, it's not necessarily a redefinition, but it's this phrase that means so many different things to so many different people. Whereas critical race theory already meant something. Yeah. And
it was
so
already a
it's
school
so
of academic
confusing.
thought for years and years and years before this one right-wing guy used it as a scaremongering tool.
Right. Critical theory not specifically applied to race is a deviation from Marxism. Conservatives call it, quote, Marxism, but it's a departure from Marxism. Interesting.
All right, well, that's a big topic.
I listened to a lot of lefty chats, and they pulled some edgy sits, just so you know you might possibly do. Okay, great.
What's that?
Okay, so, great.
Well, I'm going to keep going with this article.
Keep going with the article. Also, M9000, if you want to get edgy, we're happy to talk to you with our voice, if you want to come on our voice chat. Otherwise, if things get weird in the chat, we will ban pretty quick.
Yes.
Okay.
We don't know.
But if you want to talk to us with your voice,
no
we're
bullying
happy
people
to
in chat, no spamming, or the ban comes to ban.
Or the ban man.
Okay, the cancellation attempts matter even when they don't succeed because they demonstrate a decrease in tolerance for a wide range of views on campus. And that, again, raised the question of, like, should a full spectrum of views be fully entertained and infinitely entertained on college campuses? Is there any point where one person's freedom of speech threatens another person's safety on campus? I'd say there are instances of that. Greg has defended Greg, my guy, has defended free speech on campus for over 20 years and knows firsthand that there have always been contentious debates, but trying to get scholars fired for their bad views was relatively rare. Again, no numbers, just Greg says it was relatively rare and not so anymore.
I can't with this.
It's like, and you know what's funny? Like when I because I wrote a whole response to this on Instagram, and like I just kind of went off the cuff, like my first thoughts and questions and analyses. And I was wondering, I was like, okay, maybe if I go back in, like things are going to make more sense, and like I'll see, like maybe I jump to some conclusions, blah blah blah. And the more we go into this, the more I'm like, wow, this just sucks. This is just like really bad journalism and bad analysis and all these weird little holes in their sources and their assertions. Take, for example, Concordia University's recent suspension without due process of philosophy professor Gregory Schultz for writing an article criticizing the university for, quote, coming under the influence of wokeism, unquote. Which Schultz, and like, anyone says like, oh no, the wokeism is coming, is like, you can just say, oh, they're dumb. They're dumb. Probably shouldn't be a professor if they're that dumb. I think professors are supposed to be smart, right? Generally speaking, maybe. Is that a good standard for professors? I don't know. Am I just being a canceller? Who knows? Yeah. But I think if someone writes something as stupid as that the university is coming under the influence of wokeism, like, probably shouldn't be a professor. Which Schultz argued is antithetical to the university's Lutheran foundation. Well, God, I wouldn't want to be antithetical to Lutheranism. What a tragedy that would be. Or the case of Richard Taylor, a former adjunct history professor at St. John's University. He gave a presentation to his class about the Columbian Exchange, the interchange of people, resources, and diseases between the Eastern and Western hemispheres after Columbus's arrival in the Americas.
Oh, yes, you mentioned this. Yes.
At the end, he asked students, do the positives justify the negatives? For this, he was accused of being a dangerous threat to the education of the student body, on the bizarre basis that his question represented advocacy for slavery. He was fired for violating the university's policy against bias, discrimination, and harassment. So here's one that I think is too much.
Right. I mean, it's a question to like, he wasn't like, the positives justify the negatives.
No, he
asked a
do
question.
the positives justify it? It's a discussion question. And I do think professors should be allowed to ask discussion questions, even if one side of it could be, provocative.
Right.
And it's a good way to test if your students know the right answer, which is no. You can never check if your students know the correct answer to that question unless you ask it. And the answer is no. The answer is definitely no. No. The positives do not justify the negatives of Columbus's ship. And let's not forget Asheen Fanzi, a former adjunct business professor at Babson College, who was fired for joking that in response to former President Trump's threat to target Iranian cultural sites, Iran's leaders should target Minnesota's Mall of America and one of the Kardashian family's homes.
I mean, like, it's a good joke.
Funny, yeah. Yeah, no. Again, don't think that person should be fired.
No.
Let's call that out.
But also, adjuncts can be fired for anything.
Right.
Adjuncts make as much as like a kindergarten teacher in some places.
It's a good point. And again, as we've said a couple times before, if you want people to have, their jobs and their needs protected, like let's go over to socialism. Let's have workers control the means of production.
Right.
And let's provide for everyone's basic needs, and then you can say whatever you want. Your boss can fire you, or your company can democratically fire you if they want, and you still won't be starved to death.
Well, yes, and that actually, M9000 is speaking to this right now, saying that we shouldn't, it's not necessarily pure free speech that they're standing for, but the First Amendment should cover freedom of expression. The issue with that, as we mentioned earlier while we were talking about this, is capitalism, because if you are fired from a private company or deplatformed from somewhere where you're making money, you can starve, and that's not something that should ever happen.
And they can fire you for any reason.
They can fire you for any reason.
And yeah, maybe they have a reason that isn't protected, and then they just say a different reason and fire you. Like bosses are going to keep firing people whenever they want to fire people until the system radically changes.
I got fired from a job because I was too goofy.
Sure, there you go.
My boss was like, "You're way too goofy, you're fired."
Well, I guess if that happened, then cancel culture is one.
Cancel culture has affected me personally.
Right, yeah. One time I took a dump on a guy's car and he screamed at me. So, cancel culture.
What?
It's just out of control. That didn't actually happen. That's a joke. But maybe someday.
One day.
A man can dream.
I've always dreamt about taking a shit in someone's yard when I was mad. I wouldn't. Because, I wouldn't be able to poop. I'm poop shy. But a girl can dream.
Yes. At Kirkwood Community College, for example, Professor Jeff Klinsman's criticism of former President Trump went viral, leading the president of the college to demand Klinsman's resignation. Klinsman eventually settled. And here again, they don't... Okay, does it link here? They don't seem to link to, what was the criticism? This is just so you can they have this is nice that they have a little
a little
okay, so this is like the so
political motivation from the right.
In response to a tweet by Trump calling Antifa members gutless radical left whack jobs. Yeah, I know who I'd clock with a bat. Yeah, see, that's not that I'd say is extreme too. Making a joke about, oh God, I'd like to smack that guy with a bat, not worth it.
Blayvik says, I wish I was poop shy. Also, M9000, I disagree with your definition of socialism. I don't think that that's what the socialism standpoint is.
Yeah.
But being poop shy sucks, Blayvik. I don't know what you're talking about. It's the worst. When you're in public and you're and then you can't, it sucks.
And let's not forget Professor Lisa Durden of Essex Community College. She went on Tucker Carlson's Fox News show to defend a Black Lives Matter event and was fired by Essex. The college president claimed the school was, quote, inundated with, quote, feedback from students, faculty, and prospective students who expressed fear about Durden. This claim ended up being a vast overstatement, to say the least. Records obtained by Fire revealed that administrators had already decided to take action before any member of the public contacted them. Isn't that interesting? So maybe this is more about people in positions of power misbehaving than it is about a woke mob? Maybe.
But I can't speak to that exactly, or we'll get on to them.
And only one person complained at the university in the first 13 days after Durden's Fox appearance. So which one is it? Is it that college students are out of control and getting professors fired? Or is it that the college students' objections are being blown out of proportion and it's actually the people in positions of leadership and power at the university making these decisions? Because you've been going back and forth, authors of this article. And this is how you can tell, like, when someone's defending something silly. It's like their arguments are all over the place and not consistent, and they leave out inconvenient data. If you follow our work at Fire's website, you can find plenty of regular new examples, and because we assume readers are skeptical, we link to documentation in each case. And I respect that. I respect that they're chronicling this. I think that's good. That chronicling is good. Without, like, you don't need any of this canceling or cancel culture talk to just track when, like, professors are being protested for stupid reasons, or being fired for stupid reasons. Oh, and then this section will be fun. Conservative hypocrisy and progressive denial.
Oh,
that's us. We're the second part.
The denial.
That's me.
We wrote nope on our title. We wrote nope. We did it. We denied.
The perpetuation of cancel culture is bipartisan. Conservatives criticize it while practicing it. Progressives deny it while being victims of it. Oh, shit. Over the past year, Republican legislators introduced a series of anti-critical race theory, here we go, bills seeking to restrict teachers' ability to teach topics related to race and sexuality. These bills, when applied in higher education contexts, are almost always unconstitutional. Pennsylvania's HB 1532, for example, violates long-standing academic freedom commitments by banning all instruction about racist concepts and prohibits campuses from hosting speakers who espouse any racist or sexist concepts. Republican legislators in more than a dozen states have filed similar bills that would ban discussion of, quote, divisive concepts in college classrooms, violating more than 65 years of Supreme Court precedent protecting academic freedom. Iowa and Oklahoma state legislatures introduced bills specifically designed to ban the teaching of the 1619 Project in college classrooms. Prohibiting discussion of these topics also prohibits criticism of the ideas, which limits students' intellectual development. So, this is bad. Republican legislators make bad laws exclusively. And so that, in no way do I read this and think, oh, I'm a victim of cancel culture, or the left is a victim of cancel culture. This is not cancel culture. This is shitty Republicans mounting shitty, stupid protests for vile causes. You don't need to talk about canceling or cancel culture to criticize this shit. It's absurd.
Yeah, well, like, and I mean, relevant to this is the new Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, too. It's like, I wouldn't call that cancel culture either.
Right.
No. I just call it a horrible
bigotry.
Law.
It's called, homophobic bigotry.
Homophobic law.
Yes, a bigoted, shitty law. There's already plenty of words for this stuff, everybody.
It's not.
You don't need to invent cancel culture. These bills contribute to the cancellations of individual faculty. In 2021, Christopher Busey, an associate professor of education at the University of Florida, claimed he was threatened with discipline if he used the phrase, quote, critical race, unquote, in his curriculum. Also in 2021, Maryland Republican Representative Mark Green, who previously introduced a bill banning critical race theory, wrote to the United States Naval Academy demanding the termination of Lynn Chandler Garcia, an associate professor of political science, over her op-ed on why she teaches CRT. Again, stupid, bad protests. Though conservatives talk a good game about defending, quote, free speech and decreeing cancel culture, hypocrisy among the movement is not new. You think? In 2007, wow. In 2017, 3 Nebraska Republican legislators sponsored a bill to protect free speech on campus, then called on the University of Nebraska to fire graduate teaching assistant Courtney Lawton for her progressive political activism. Right, yeah. Dumb. Hypocritical. Correct. Good one. Meanwhile, some progressives remain so committed to denying cancel culture is a problem they won't even admit it exists, even after they themselves are canceled. Oh, we're such fools. Why won't we admit it?
Because that's not what it fucking is.
Yeah, no, because we don't think I've been canceled. That's what you authors
the thing.
Don't seem to understand, is that we understand there are better words for this.
Can't you see you've been canceled?
Won't you please internalize?
How can you deny that you've been canceled when you yourself have been canceled?
Yeah, why won't you internalize my insane perspective on reality?
If being canceled was something like someone pressed the button and I just like became nothingness.
Right.
Then
I'd be
believe
concerned.
in cancel.
Yeah, if our society was built around like the great cancel button and there was like a shrine in Washington D.C. where there was a big red glowing button on a pedestal like surrounded by guards, and every now and then someone was deemed worthy of canceling, and then a priest in golden robes walked in and entered the name, typed it in, and pressed the button, and then that person just puffed into a cloud of smoke. Then I'd be like, whoa, this is scary. We got to do something.
Or like, what was I going to say? Like in the book The Giver, when they like shoot the babies out the thing.
I haven't read The Giver, but okay.
Sorry, I just ruined The Giver for some people.
Oh no, the exciting climax where they shoot the babies out of the thing.
They shoot the babies.
You ruined it.
That's canceling to me. They're canceling babies.
Yeah. Consider Will Wilkinson, the former vice president of policy at the Niskanen Center, who was fired in 2021 for tweeting, quote, "If Biden really wanted unity, he'd lynch Mike Pence."
Jesus Christ. Oh, God. Oh, my God.
That's pretty funny, though.
I mean, whoa. Good God.
And I think that to me does not land as he's legitimately advocating for that. He's making a joke. Because Trump's followers were calling for that to happen to Mike Pence.
Exactly.
And so it's funny in that context. And
It's
I get
funny
that
in
it's
that
edgy.
context. I get that it's edgy too. Like it can be like in bad taste-ish.
Sure. But taste is subjective.
It's like when Vosh said, women shut up.
Yeah, that was a big-ass debate online. Conservative news sites such as The Federalist and The Daily Caller condemned Wilkinson, and a Twitter mob ensued.
Love a Twitter mob.
Despite losing his job because of cancel culture, Wilkinson continues to dismiss the phenomenon, characterizing cancel culture as conservative hysteria and a boogeyman. Yes, because he doesn't think that him getting fired for making an edgy tweet is cancel culture. I'm sure he knew, like, well, yeah, I was kind of skating the edge with that one, Like, and that's the thing is, like, just as much as it is, within these authors' intellectual right to say that cancel culture is real and that they think it's a problem and here's their evidence, it is just as much in anyone else's right to say, I don't think this is canceling. To say, like, I don't feel canceled. I feel that I was protested because a bunch of people didn't like my tweet. And then this administration that has power over my position terminated my position to protect themselves from the consequences of the scrutiny that my tweet brought. It's just not everyone thinks the way you do, authors at the Daily Beast.
No, but they know. They know. They had some studies.
They've talked to Greg, okay?
Greg, dude.
Greg has a lot of feelings.
Where's our cousin Greg, by the way?
Yeah,
Greg,
I know.
where are you?
Where's the good Greg? Laura Burnett, a former history professor at Collin College, represents another example of cancel culture denialism among the canceled. And again, just saying it like it's just that's the fact. That's canceled. They were canceled by the cancel culture, you see. In 2021, under pressure from Texas Representative Jeff Leach and conservative news outlets, Collin College terminated Burnett for tweeting during the vice presidential debate that Mike Pence needed to shut, quote, his little demon mouth up. Unquote. Burnett, represented by Fire, filed a First Amendment lawsuit and ultimately accepted the college's offer of $70,000 and attorney's fees. And I'm also all for that. Like, by all means, sue them. And like, if you think someone was fired unfairly, cool, yeah, go for it. Yet Burnett later wrote an article arguing there's no such thing as cancel culture. Yeah, we are able to believe this even when we've been the target of a dumb protest. Adding, quote, there are social norms of public behavior and expression. One of the sources of pressure that shape these social norms are public denunciations for shameful behavior. Yeah, well written, Burnett. Based on Burnett's framework, there is no way to determine whether social pressure is legitimate or illegitimate. It is decided by faculty and administrator groups that are overwhelmingly politically homogenous and averse to controversy. So based on Burnett's framework, there's no way to determine whether social pressure is legitimate or illegitimate. Well, yeah, there's not, guys. The concept of legitimate and illegitimate are subjective.
Right.
Like, yes, that's the thing. You have to actually take these things on a case-by-case basis and look at each protest and discuss, is this legitimate or illegitimate and why, and present your evidence and your arguments. There is never going to be one standard, I don't think.
It's the same shit like ethicists have never in history ever agreed on universal ethics.
Right.
It's never happened. And like, so when you're talking about like interpersonal stuff or societal issues, there is not going to be a universal truth wholly agreed on, wholly agreed upon by everyone, which is sometimes sad when you think you have the right idea. But, you know, the legitimacy is completely subjective.
Yeah, and
any
why
argument.
I think the most defensible as objective is like a humanist ethics system where it's just like, if it hurts or kills humans, it's bad.
Don't do it.
Like I think that's like if we as a species can't agree on that as an ethical code, what can we ever agree on? You know, you'd think that would be, and that's basically my metric for whether a individual or an institution or a larger entity made up of many individuals is bad.
Yeah.
Does it hurt or kill people?
Right.
You know, it's really that simple. And so many people in the world, and especially in America, I can certainly say, love to debate this and try to say like, no, there are some cases where it's good to hurt and kill people. And it's like, I don't know. Again, like the only thing I can think of is self-defense. Is like if someone's threatening your safety, then I get, you know, throwing a fist back. Or if someone's trying to kill you, of like trying to kill them to keep yourself safe. But anything besides that just seems completely unjustifiable to me. And why people, you know, like in like, for example, like the Israel-Palestine debate of where it's like, well, you know, yes, we you know, killed some kids, but the Palestinian terrorist shot a rocket at me. And it's like, if a guy was aiming a rocket launcher at me and was wearing a full suit made of babies, made of children, and I had a rocket launcher too, and I shoot that guy who's wearing a baby suit with my rocket launcher, that's bad. Like, I understand that there's like an instinct of self-preservation. You don't want to get blown up by a rocket. And so like, I certainly will have compassion for someone who, when confronted with that, is like, I got to defend myself, boom, and blows up the guy in the baby suit.
Picture.
But for me, if like, sorry, I mean, I guess I'm giving this away now. I'm giving everyone the hack code. But if you come at me wrapped in babies, I'm going to let you just shoot the rocket. I mean, like, I'll try to dodge the rocket. Like, you shoot the rocket, I'm going to try to get out of the way. Maybe I'll throw up a piece of a shield, like, I don't know, plywood, a trash can lid. Like obviously I'm going to try to avoid the damage to my person, but I don't understand how people justify, like, well, you got to shoot the rocket at their baby suit.
Yeah.
Like, no, like, don't, like, I don't know. Like, sometimes I'm like the ethical thing to me, or the moral thing, is to just say, well, they got me.
Yeah.
They wrapped themselves in babies, and now I can't shoot a rocket at them.
It's an incredibly what's the word I'm looking for here? I can't find it. I'll find it. Ragnar said, I just got an ad as you started talking about the Israel-Palestine, and I think it's probably a good thing since I think I disagree with you significantly.
Possible.
I mean, I wouldn't shoot a rocket at a bunch of babies either.
Right.
I mean,
no, I was just saying that if a
very
guy,
funny mental picture.
If a guy wraps himself in a baby suit and aims a rocket launcher at me, I'm not going, and I have a rocket launcher, I'm not going to shoot him with my rocket launcher. I'll try to dodge. I'll try to get out of the way. I'll try to protect myself. But I'm not gonna kill those babies to get the bad guy or to defend my own safety. I'd rather those babies live, and it's terrible that a person would do that. And I think the person who put on the baby suit should be vilified as well.
Absolutely.
But so should the person who's like, I'll just kill these babies.
Yeah.
You know, I don't get the justification.
Well, and
that's obviously a very, you know,
it's
specific metaphor.
Specific example, but at the same time, it's like it speaks to a much more nuanced debate in something like the Israel-Palestine debate.
Yeah. Like, and to be clear, I loathe Hamas. And I loathe the Israeli government. I hate them both because they both kill children and many innocent human beings who are fully grown. And Israel has killed way more people than Hamas. Just in pure body count, there's no comparison. So that's how my morality works. If you killed the most kids, you're the worst person. I don't know. Is that insane? Is that a totally crazy moral system of moral thought? I think it makes pretty clear sense. So anyway, back to this article. Burnett and Wilkinson could have recognized that the intolerance-fueling cancel culture is bipartisan. However, that would require admitting that their side, too, has an intolerance problem. So they could have recognized... Well, and again, this is all just built on the assumption that cancel culture is real and that they've got the ultimate perfect definition for it, which is not true. When such denial occurs, conservatives are correct to assert that progressive ideology can overtake reason. That's your example? The people who criticize cancel culture being a thing, and not like there's so many progressives who have legitimately awful takes that you could point to, not this. Anyway, those who subscribe to such an unprincipled, self-serving definition will only oppose the sanctioning of those who share their own opinions, rather than opposing illegitimate sanctioning based on the principle that free expression must be protected. This is exactly what cancel culture does.
This article is like talking in circles.
Yeah.
Okay. Those who describe such self.
Yes, I mean, but this is a dynamic of human civilization. Like,
right.
Yes,
right.
Everyone's going to denounce the people who share their opinion, or who don't share their opinions, and celebrate the people who do. Like, the question is, who has the better argument? Who has more legitimate evidence and concrete data? The answer is not just like let anyone say anything forever. I mean, this goes to a bigger problem I have with a lot of modern human civilization and political discourse, is like conversations are kind of fucking useless if you never come to a conclusion. Like, the fact that we're still debating like whether or not abortion should be legal is it's an embarrassment to the species.
It's unbelievable.
Like, this should have been settled by Roe v. Wade. It should have been settled way earlier than that. It never should have been.
We thought it was settled by
a discussion,
Roe v. Wade.
and it goes to show that, like, if you believe that conversations, that big cultural moral conversations should be infinitely open-ended, you are arguing for a world where the suffering of the most like ignored and disenfranchised goes on indefinitely and with no end. Like, you got to come to conclusions, and you got to object to schools of thought that make the world a worse place. And then this section, elites should not get to decide what terms we use, and that includes cancel culture. And remember, this article is trying to say what terms to use. But it's saying elites can't do that. Elites can't say what terms are good or not. Only we, the authors of the Daily Beast, can say.
Also, Sweatiest Gamers, only subscribers can post links. It's for everyone's protection. And yes, I'm sorry, it deletes old messages.
You can send links in a private message.
have your link right here because I'm a mod. And it's a link to a Daily Caller article about Colorado governor signing a bill legalizing abortion up until birth.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So someone wanted to pass a law that you get an abortion right up until the day before birth. Is that the claim?
I can look at the article.
And I think it's best to get an abortion early in the pregnancy.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that's really a response to. Is it that because one person wanted an extreme rule put in place that now the entire practice of abortion is delegitimized in your eyes? Because that's weird.
But is that what you're saying?
I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
A fertilized egg and refuse to not have independent or derivative rights under the law of the state. Cool. Also, there are a lot of situations in which late-term abortions are necessary, and 9 times out of 10, 9.99 times out of 10, women don't just go like, just kidding, I don't want this baby.
The day before.
At 9 months.
No.
That doesn't
That's not a
happen.
thing that happens.
I don't think I've ever heard of that ever happening. It's almost always medical.
Anyway, abortion should just be legal. And if you try to make it illegal, it won't stop abortion. It'll just make abortion more dangerous for women. We know this from every time any government has tried to
that
make
abortion is
illegal.
still being debated, not my opinions. Yeah, I mean,
it
shouldn't even be
Got
debated.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification. And yeah, no, it shouldn't be debated.
Hey, thanks for the follow,
Thanks
Ray
for the
Epps.
following, Ray Epps. Or is that Trey Epps?
Ray.
Oh, Ray Epps. Oh, I see it now. Ray Epps. Nice. Welcome. Thanks for following. So I think we're kind of getting near the end of this article. I think there's a lot of comments, and that's why it looks long. So some believe that because, quote unquote, cancel culture is used too often and too broadly to describe speech and actions which may simply constitute criticism, we should abandon the term entirely and replace it with something else. And again, this is reducing, because what we are saying specifically, and I've heard other people say too, it's not about get rid of the term and replace it with something else. It's about get rid of the term and use the words that already have existed for these things forever.
Right.
Protest, boycott, call for the removal of. There's already language for this. However, to abandon the term, quote, cancel culture, unquote, is to capitulate to those who pretend the problem doesn't exist while isolating the majority of Americans who, according to their data, was a minority of Americans, by the way, who are anxious about being canceled. If saying majority who are anxious, that might have been the 70% numbers. That might be true. The majority of Americans who are anxious about being canceled but may not have the time or interest to keep up with ever-changing elite-approved lingo.
There it is.
There it is.
We found it.
Oh, yes. Looks like somebody...
We found it.
It looks like this is a liberal author who's more mad at leftists than anybody else.
I love when liberals hate leftists.
Yeah,
That's
I know.
So
Listen to
fun.
us. Listen to us always trying to change the words with like crazy new words like protest and boycott. Gosh, will we ever stop changing and disapproving and approving what is the right elite lingo? Like, again, it's just like, this is a very specific, it feels like a straw man they're responding to.
When elites seek to control the terminology, they often do so for the purpose of signaling in-group membership. Doing so often excludes the vast majorities of Americans from the conversation. So saying boycott excludes the vast majority of Americans from the conversation.
And here's the thing, I'm not trying to force anyone to, I'm not trying to get like the cops to come and say, you can't say it anymore. I'm requesting for everyone to use better terminology that already exists and is more apropos and not fear-mongering. It's just elites seeking to control the terminology. We're just criticizing this term like you're criticizing our criticism of it.
Sweaters Gamer said, love how neither the left nor the right wants anything to do with liberals. Liberals it's just a cop-out. Like,
it's just a cop-out.
Shut up.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. So often if a liberal disagrees with me strongly, it's just like they don't know what words mean again. And I'm like, I just wish you knew what words meant. Now here's actually a good example. For example, although the term Latinx is popular within our news media, entertainment industry, corporations, politics, and universities, Pew Research found that only 3% of Latino adults use the word. And that's something I've talked about before, and even in stuff I've done on YouTube. Of like, I don't use that word because the point would be to make Latino Americans feel more included, and it seems most of them don't like the word.
Yeah.
It is an example of what James Carville calls, quote, faculty lounge language. As author Helen Pluckrose points out, what a name, Pluckrose. Modern social justice advocates derive power from controlling language. Yes, that's our plan.
Trying to control the language.
Because we're trying to get you to use dictionary definitions of words, or we'll get you. As language changes, people who use an outdated term or phrase are quickly dismissed as ignorant or uneducated. And I do think this is an example where, like, I don't like language policing. I think there are many times where it does come from this kind of place of like, oh, you don't know the new word. Like, if someone is using outdated language that is, you know, not helpful to the conversation and perhaps even damaging to people's safety and society, I think the first response is to say, like, oh, actually, I think there's better language for that. Here it is, like, be a teacher, you know? And then if the person is like, I don't care what some people say, I'll say what words I want, then you can go like, oh, you're an asshole. Okay, cool, got it. And you can move on, you know, like, seems pretty simple. And it's not about like trying to like, you know, be the in-group and out-group. It's just like, language is a powerful thing. Language provides access to understanding and capacity in all contexts of human existence. And if you're working with outdated, faulty language, you have less power in the world. And I think really you should be excited to learn about the latest linguistic interpretations of reality from the people who devote their lives and their careers to doing so.
Right. And even from an apolitical, you know, philosophical standpoint, language is our access to being in the world.
Absolutely. Fundamental.
So use of you know, well thought out proper language will actually impact your existence, as well as the interpretation of your and other people's existence. It's just like, and I also understand, you know, certain like access to good language is gatekeepy. Like, you can't get into, not everyone can afford to go to college. Not everyone can, you know, read a bunch of books. Like, I understand this.
And there's a lot of racism in the gatekeeping
Tons
of
language, racism.
You know, and that like, if like you know, a culture or a community come up with new slang and then go like, that's not the right word, it's like, then yeah, I'm like, you're just being an asshole.
People
like,
are still mad about literally.
Right, if someone says axe instead of ask, it's like, I get what you're saying. You're like there's no confusion here. I know what you like. The language has done its job of conveying a concept from that person's brain into mine, and then to go like, actually the correct is it's like, that to me is gatekeeping.
Yeah. Welcome back from meeting, Ragnats.
Welcome back, Ragnats.
What was I gonna say? Yeah, but like, it's more important to make the distinction between something like cancel culture and something like a dialect specific to a subculture of people.
Yes.
So like AAVE is not bad language. Right. Using the words cancel culture when you mean boycott or is protest. Bad language. Yeah. That's the difference. It's like, it's not...
It's a scarier term for something we already have words for. So why do you want to use a scarier term for it? There's some ulterior motive there, because there's already words. Why do you want to use scary words? Seems like you're trying to make people more scared, commonly referred to as scaremongering. I don't know.
What does that quote say? Dreyfus, Socrates, and Galileo were mere individuals, but that doesn't stop us being rightfully outraged by their treatment, even centuries after the fact.
I think we'll get more context in a second. But the desire to control language only grew stronger as campuses became less ideologically diverse. Speech codes, which we define as policies that prohibit speech which outside of campus boundaries would be protected under the First Amendment, quietly increased in number after being soundly defeated in both the court of public opinion and courts of law by the mid-1990s. At the same time, elites attempted to rehabilitate the meaning of political correctness as something akin to politeness. It's an interesting claim that I think you got to provide some evidence for. But this thing, so speech codes, which we define as policies that prohibit speech which outside of campus boundaries would be protected under the First Amendment. Now, what is it outside of campus boundary? Again, like under the First Amendment, you're protected from your speech being curtailed by the government.
Right.
Not by a university. Right? I guess maybe if it's a government university.
I don't know. It's.
But even then, the university is taking tuition. It's operating as a private business. Like,
Yeah.
It just feels like this is stuff that's protected when you're not at a job.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and I'm also like, look, I'm not a legal scholar, so
Neither am I.
I'll just say, there's stuff I can be missing there.
M9000 said something saying it's wrong to say ax instead of ask is racist. Correct.
Yeah.
That's not the same thing as having a feeling that academics want people to use terminology that they came up with. I think in this specific instance, though, this isn't academic language. Using terms like protest or boycott, that's not academic language. That's just language that people have access to.
The people pushing cancel culture as a term are the ones inventing new language.
It's not like I'm saying like postmodernism and like you have to know what that means in order to be a part of this conversation.
No.
We all, like, not we all, but most of us understand what boycotting and protesting is.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, inserting the term cancel culture is a suggested use of language.
Yes,
not the
absolutely.
words that were already there and already accessible.
Absolutely.
So in this instance, that's what we're talking about specifically. I don't think it's academics trying to...
And I brought up ask versus ask as an example of gatekeeping language that I think is negative. Not to necessarily say it's perfectly comparable to this example of language being, protested. And yes, it is natural that the meanings of words evolve, certainly, just as it is natural that certain forms of humor in words can be deemed less acceptable or unacceptable over time. But, quote-unquote, PC had a specific meaning, and retroactively manipulating that meaning in the service of a present-day political takedown is disingenuous. Again, presented no evidence, no references to this claim that the
it's
elites,
like an opinion piece.
The elites attempted to rehabilitate the meaning of political correctness as something akin to politeness. I, living through the 90s as a human being, I don't remember this. And I'd really like to see actual evidence if they're going to make that claim. Consequently, we've ended up in the bizarre situation revealed by the Hidden Tribe study, wherein the overwhelming majority of people across ages and races say that political correctness is a problem, but less than a third, 30%, of the farthest left, quote-unquote, progressive activists, who comprise 8% of the population, say the same. Yeah. And again, political correctness, is it a problem? Well, when like some, woke skull dickhead on Twitter is tearing someone down for like, accidentally misgendering someone once, yes, then I think it's bad. It's bad.
Oh yeah, there is a study link under the bizarres. There's a
this one?
Yeah, that one.
Oh, oops! I meant to do.
Oopsie.
It's a whole thing. It's a whole study.
Oh, I didn't know you could press a button and then that happens.
Yeah, control.
Studies landscape.
America's polarized landscape. Well, we're not going to go through all this. This is like full
context.
This is a beefy document. But I'm sure there's a lot of fascinating insight in here.
Yeah.
Hidden Tribes of America sounds interesting. Anyway, let's focus on this article. This tiny group wields enormous power on Twitter, on college campuses, and in the media, where speech policing is something perceived as a means of social progress. By some and not others. Like, there's a lot of generalizing here. If we change language to try to appease a small group that denies the existence of cancel culture, and this isn't to appease progressives. This is to use proper, descriptive,
non-fear-mongering,
not reductive language.
Reductive is a good word for it. It's reductive.
It is reductive. It absolutely is reductive and misleading are two words that come to my mind a lot when I think about the term cancel culture. But that's the thing, is they frame it as like, and it's, again, they're saying change language. We're not asking for language to be changed. You're asking for language to be changed. Mm-hmm. You're asking for us to refer to protests and boycotts as cancel culture. Mm-hmm. You are requesting the language change, authors of this article. And even if we were to try to appease a small group, they're framing it as like, if you don't keep saying cancel culture, you're doing it because you're giving in to the woke mob. Like, that's clearly the framing. And it's like, no, this isn't about appeasing some lunatic fringe. This is about acknowledging that you're using a newly made up term that was popularized by the right wing for their victim complex to refer to an uptick in dumb protests. An uptick which, truly, now that I'm looking at this article a second time, they don't even prove, because they don't present they don't present the data from earlier years, from the aughts or the 90s or the 80s, to show us how now there's this big uptick. They just list off a bunch of big sounding numbers. At an early time in American history, the idea that the highly educated should set the standard for how the rest of us talk was generally and rightfully mocked. We see this mockery of elite language throughout the history of American entertainment, from Bugs Bunny to Humphrey Bogart, from comedians like George Carlin. Oh, they always got to cite George Carlin, who hated right-wingers and liberals, but hated right-wingers more, without a doubt, to famous musicians like Pearl Jam, the Notorious B.I.G., Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, and Walker Hayes. Furthermore, from the 80s through today, rappers like NWA, Two Live Crew, Run the Jewels, and Eminem have used, to quote the parental advisory labels, explicit content to speak about issues like abusive policing that elite white Americans often preferred to ignore. Sure, and that was great. All of these cultural icons challenge the pretensions of what Michael Lynn dubs the overclass, who want the public to abide by their social dictates. Again, this is from authors who just spent a whole article wringing their hands over the fate of tenured professors.
Yeah.
Now want to call the left elitist. Today, the response from non-elites should be, quote, "We know you know what I'm talking about, and no, you don't get to dictate precisely how I say it." Oh, shit. Well, yeah, go ahead and use the term cancel culture. That's fine, as long as, just know that when I hear someone use it, I go like, you don't have a good understanding of things. You're perfectly, I'm not trying to get cops to come and take away people's right to use the term.
Right.
Just know that educated, smart people will think you're kind of dumb when you say it. And if you're cool with that, I guess party on. Let's not abandon the term cancel culture, and let's not forget history. Despite the dismissive attitudes, there is ample evidence of a growing number of campaigns to get people fired, disinvited, deplatformed, or otherwise punished for speech that is or would be protected by the First Amendment. This is cancel culture. See, they get to dictate the definition. This
exact paragraph is at the beginning of the article.
Yeah. And so they're dictating the definition now. And by the way, if they try to dictate this definition to your average American right-winger, they disagree.
Yeah.
They would say, no, that's not cancel culture. Cancel culture is when the leftist woke mob takes down a right-winger I like. That's the definition for right. So, you are dictating the definition. It's, astounding, the hypocrisy on display. One has to wonder if those dismissing the 563 scholars targeted since 2015 and the 283 scholars targeted just since the start of 2020 know anything about the history of free speech. Oh shit, here it comes, dropping the facts. We still rightfully look back at the Sedition Act of 1798 with shame, despite the fact that only 51 people were prosecuted. Now this is an interesting paragraph. The Espionage Act of 1917 resulted in only about 2,000 prosecutions in the whole country, and the population of the U.S. was over 120 times greater than the present number of college faculty in the country. Even the Hollywood Red Scare of the 1950s only targeted around 300 Americans, and we still make movies about it. In this context, we have every reason to believe that future generations will not view the cancellations that occur today as a minor historical footnote. So comparing this, that these acts, boil it down to just the numbers, is such a strange lens to me.
Yeah. It is a strange lens because it's impact.
Yes.
Ragnath said, "Is this an article or an op-ed?"
I'd say it's an op-ed.
I'd say it's an op-ed, but they want it to be an article.
Yeah. They are citing, they are linking to a lot of sources of varying value, but that's the thing is so 300 Americans were targeted by the Hollywood Red Scare, and that's and in their view, it's more professors have lost their jobs or whatever for silly reasons. And it's but that's not, the number of people who are targeted is not what makes a bad protest a bad protest.
Right. We're
Red
talking
Scare,
about a value system here.
Right.
We're not taking a purely utilitarian approach to this. It's about the quality of what's being argued or protested,
Yeah.
not how many people.
If the Red Scare had targeted one person in Hollywood, it still would have been a bad protest. Not as big, perhaps not as, not as big in consequence, but it's still a bad protest. And that's the thing, is like, once you pretend that cancel culture is real and don't acknowledge that you can just call these things stupid protests, misguided protests, like you can see in these two authors writing, like the whole brain goes wonky because you're building everything on this false premise. And the Hollywood Red Scare was like targeting people who generally were not even leftists.
Yeah.
Like it was complete. It was like literally misaccused. Whereas in the cases they give of professors, those professors, what they were accused of were things they did.
They did or said.
Even though the accusation in many cases was silly and like their action was not worthy of great criticism or great punishment, they did actually do the thing that the protesters were calling them out for. The Hollywood Red Scare was literally targeting people who were not communists to be communists, to take them out of positions of power.
Ragnar says, I'd argue that the quality of protest is whether or not it's being conducted in good faith.
I think that's one quality of protest. I think definitely bad faith protest is probably the worst.
Oh, yeah.
If you're if you're protesting something that you don't actually think is bad because you have some ulterior motive and you're bad faith and you're trying to be manipulative, that's even worse. And I think it's also bad if you protest something that is, in my view, not worth protesting. And of course, that's just my subjective view.
Right.
Just as it's only these authors' subjective view, which things they decide are cancel culture or are not.
Right. Well, yeah, and then also I think good faith is subjective to whomever is protesting, because I think there are people who believe they're protesting something in good faith when it's like not humanist.
Right.
So I think good faith can be subjective for sure.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and like the no protest is, it's all a matter of perspective. If the protest is bad or not. If you're protesting kids being thrown in cages at the border of America and Mexico, I think that's a great protest. I think that is a heinous act, a horribly vile thing that our government does to children. And I think protesting that is smart and good. If you're, on the other hand, protesting that a toy manufacturer took the word Mr. off of the packaging for their plastic potato toy, that's a stupid and bad protest. I don't need the terms canceling or cancel culture to point out when a protest is dumb and to give my reasons and evidence and justification and arguments for why it's dumb. Again, like cancel culture, it's intellectual laziness. It's instead of going like, hey, I think these specific protests are bad and unhelpful and toxic, whatever, for reason X, Y, and Z. Here's my evidence. Here's my argument. Instead, you can just be like, oh, another example of cancel culture. Run amok. And and then so many of these people, they just stop there. That's it. That's all they have to say. And then their followers, which are usually pundits, their followers just go like, yeah, cancel culture. And they don't ask for anything more.
Right.
So by propagating the term the way this article wants to, I think really you're empowering bad faith people with a rhetorical cudgel that they can use indefinitely in any situation where they're being criticized. And I think that's bad. The minimizers forget that an injustice involving one individual can cast a dark shadow over our nation's history. After all, we still remember the censorship of Lenny Bruce and Salman Rushdie decades later. For that matter, Dreyfus, Socrates, and Galileo were mere individuals, but that doesn't stop us from being rightfully outraged by their treatment even centuries after the fact. A culture of censorship, of shaming, shunning, and attempting to destroy people's lives for ideological reasons exists in America, and Americans have a name for it: cancel culture. Again, shaming, shunning, and attempting to destroy people's lives for ideological reasons has been happening since the beginning of human civilization. If you want to point to an uptick and prove it, I will acknowledge the uptick. And I'm even willing to call it a cultural trend.
Yeah.
What I'm not, or a subculture. What I'm not willing to call it is an entirely new culture, cancel culture. This is hyperbolic, fear-mongering, reductive language, pure and simple. And their final line, let's not abandon the name in a vain attempt. because it wouldn't even please us.
No.
No,
I'd be still mad.
No, I'd still be mad because we're obviously arguing in bad faith already, according to these brilliant authors. Let's not abandon that name in a vain attempt to please the people most responsible for perpetuating the problem. So after all that,
what a doozy.
They wrap up with blaming it on the left.
What
Cancel
a
culture
doozy.
is the crime of the left, according to these authors.
Ay, ay, ay. Oh.
So there you go. That is a real thing that real professionally acknowledged journalists were paid real money to write at the Daily Beast, a major publication.
Does the Daily? I don't know much about the Daily Beast. Does it lean one way or another? Like what?
I don't think they. I think they think they're pretty liberal.
Right.
Is that not a link to their page? There we go. No claim they buried. Okay.
Article 6 lawyers. Great. Russia unleashed an extra socks. Yikes. Yeah, can we Google it?
The Beast. Left or rights? Left. So yeah, they're left.
Okay.
That's what I thought.
That's what I figured.
That's the thing. It's like, a lot of respected liberal intellectuals are sounding more and more like right-wingers these days.
Well, because what happens is when you're specifically attacking progressives, because I know progressives is the term a lot of people use for the left, who are on the left, you are, by proxy, insinuating that you would prefer the status quo, which is a right ideal.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And
I want to read this. I think this is most recent from Ragnatz. I'd maybe argue that people who think they are protesting something in good faith but aren't, it's probably because they're being manipulated by people who want the protest to happen in bad faith. But that may require deep research. Totally. And I absolutely have compassion for people who have been bamboozled into protesting something because they sincerely think, that's compassion I have for the anti-abortion folks, that a lot of them really believe that babies are being murdered.
Yeah.
And the primary distinction between the pro-choice and pro-life camps is that I don't think a baby is being murdered.
Right. I mean, that's the biggest debate is when is it
when is it a
life?
person? And there is no
person?
scientific answer to that question. It's a philosophical question of when does life begin? When does consciousness begin?
Right, totally.
So no, definitely there are many cases where people are bad faith manipulators convince a large group of people to protest something, and those people protesting honestly, sincerely believe that the thing they're protesting is a great danger and that their protest is helping. So that is absolutely good faith for those people who've been manipulated. And I'd still call it a bad protest because its arguments and goals, I think, are toxic.
Right.
Bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Good shit.
Oh, nice. Thanks, Ragnatz.
Yeah, let me see. I saw it. I'll watch it after.
Yeah, we'll watch it after the stream. Folks here. But yeah, no, I mean,
Nice shit.
isn't that a wild article?
That's insane.
And isn't it kind of like what I really like about well, first also I want to say what we agree with, which is yes, there seems to be at least some kind of uptick. Again, they don't present earlier data to really show a trend. But I will say, even from my anecdotal observation, that there does seem to be an uptick of college professors being protested and taken out of their jobs for bad reasons. I think that's bad, and I'm really glad that they're chronicling that and drawing attention to it. That I can totally get on. And I also appreciate that early on they seem to they acknowledge the hypocrisy of the right wing, that they often complain about cancel culture, but then do bad protests, and though that kind of gets a little made moot by later on in the article, where they clearly vilify leftists as the dastardly perpetrators of cancel culture denial.
Right.
And the third thing is that I do think that if a majority of Americans are feeling afraid to say what they actually think, I think that's generally a bad thing. even if people have shitty beliefs, I want to know. I want people with shitty beliefs to feel somewhat free to say, just so that they can be identified.
So I can know I don't want to
Yes.
be near you.
Yes. Now, at the same time, that can go too far where, if you have a bunch of people saying something really shitty and toxic and dangerous, for example, like with trans people,
Yeah.
then trans people are being put in more danger by that shitty language. And at that
Right.
point, I will tell people to shut up. I won't ask for the government to send a speech Gestapo
Yeah.
to make people shut up, but I will individually, personally say to the person saying the bad things, I think you should shut up. And it seems like what is far more of a plague on culture today is not the canceling, but this plague of people crying cancel culture.
Yeah.
When simply people said like, wow, you said something stupid and wrong and I don't like it. And people are like, oh, here come the cancelers. Because that's the thing, guys like Dave Chappelle, Gina Carano, they don't distinguish between the legitimate criticism, like between the people who are coming at them very diplomatically and not asking for them to have their platforms taken away or for them to be censored. They don't distinguish. They hear any criticism and they say, oh, here come the cancelers. So it's just, I really, it's hard for me to have any kind of intellectual respect for this cancel culture notion when I see that it seems the people pushing it so consistently have bad thinking in general. They just seem to be really bad at analysis, which is unfortunate. And I want free education for all, so we can all get better at critical analysis.
I agree. Ragnar said, by the way, since 2015 is over 6 years, so those numbers are about over a 6-year period. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And on a scale of 0 to 10, how much confirmation bias was used in
These
that
are good
article?
questions, Ragnats. Yeah, no, exactly. It's tons of confirmation bias. Again, the fact that they don't present it's the most if you want to assert that there's a statistical trend, you have to present data that shows that it wasn't a thing before.
Right, not that it is a thing now.
Yeah.
See, it's a thing now.
See, look at these numbers, 163, 70, 49. Yeah, okay, but what happened in 2013, 2010, 2002, 1995? For all we know, this is this happens in waves, maybe. I don't know, because we weren't given the data. It's telling that there are no graphs in that article.
Yes, and also, what was I going to say? Also, I think so much of it has to do with the internet. Like, if there's any uptick in anything, it's the popular use of social media.
Yes.
Like, that's what it is. It's not like this cultural reset.
No, it's an existing culture.
We already thought these things.
Yes.
Now we can scream about it online.
Yes.
That's what changed.
That's what changed. I think the way I put it on Instagram is that that cancel culture became a thing people started saying. It just so happens at the exact moment in history that the traditionally voiceless were granted the power by technology to digitally scream at the upper class. So it really seems to me that it's just like the upper class in America and around the world for the first time is getting screamed at directly by the lower class in a way that the lower class could not. I mean, back in the day, they had to burn down the factory and nail a dead rat to the foreman's door. That was the only way back then. But now you can just go on your phone and write at Mitch McConnell, you suck shit, and
yeah, my mom does it all the time.
yeah, that is what I think shifted, not some new culture of canceling. It's just now people are,
Right.
and also it's late stage capitalism. It's also that people are more desperate and thus more emotional and thus more angry and lashing out than they've ever been. And like I said on Instagram too, if you really want motherfuckers to chill out, abolish capitalism. And they won't be nearly as just generally upset. People are freaking out because they're getting paid shit. They can't afford their basic necessities. People can't afford rent. Then now food prices are skyrocketing. It's as long as all of these material stressors are around, people are going to be a little extra mad about everything, to the point that, you know, if they're sick of a world of bigotry of whatever kind that targets them, and then a professor makes some casual comment that's like a microaggression that probably isn't worth having a big reaction to, they're going to have a big reaction because they're freaked out, because they're in a state of emotional duress all the time. We all kind of are now, unless you're one of the richest people in the world, which apparently they have their own state of emotional duress of just being terrified of being canceled. At least some of them. You know, the ones whose names we actually know.
Yeah, right. Oof.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's a doozy.
It's a doozy.
Good shit.
How are you feeling, Zoe?
Good. A little tired, but good. You know, big articles.
And yeah, Ragnets.
Tiring.
Yeah, Facebook, smartphones for HN.
Yeah, it just gives people
That's
access.
the new thing. That's what's new, not a cancel culture. But yeah, so I feel good.
Yeah,
we talked about it. Or
Yeah.
do you thinking, do you want to play a game? Should we wrap?
What are you thinking?
I don't know. It's only 5.
Okay.
5:11.
Do you want to... if we played a game, I could either do a disco or we could go back to a Subnautica. What are you thinking? If we did that.
Why don't we just bounce back tomorrow?
Sure.
Yeah, I feel like you're kind of feeling like, I feel like it's kind of winding down.
Yeah, I'm a little tired.
Yeah. And we have other stuff to do, right? We got to do some work.
We gotta do some stuff.
Delete some stuff off the hard drive. This will be a nice YouTube video too. But yeah, so cool. So we'll wrap it up. Thanks everyone for being here today. Thanks Ragnats for staying in the conversation the longest and engaging so much. Much appreciated. Great chatting today. And we'll be back tomorrow at noon Pacific Standard Time.
Oh yeah.
For more of the Casey and Zoe thing. Games to be decided. Though I'm thinking maybe Thursday we do cartoons again.
Sure.
Start with cartoons.
Sure. Tomorrow's Wednesday though.
Yeah. That's
Oh,
what I'm
okay.
saying.
It's games to be decided about. Got it.
But yeah, we're gonna start making goofing on old Saturday morning cartoons more of a general thing because I love that shit.
Love it.
And yeah, thanks again, everybody.
We love you.
We love you. We hope you have a great rest of your whatever time it is where you are. And yeah, we'll be back tomorrow at noon Pacific Standard Time. I am Casey Katsaris.
I am Zoe Katsaris.
This is the Casey and Zoe thing, and we will see you all on the Flippy Dip.
Woo!
All right. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.